Hey folks, it's Nate. Thanks for joining me at the art table again today. And we're going to take a look at another installment of 20th Century Boys. Been a little while since I'd done this. When we last left off, we were at the end of Volume 7 of the Perfect Edition, and we had just seen Kana and Yoshitsune complete their trip to the past in the VR game. And we got a lot of insight into the characters, specifically the history of Kenji and our friend. And we also saw some pretty good character moments for Yoshitsune himself, who had to kind of think a little bit about where he was and what he was aiming to do. I also have to correct something I said in the last video I did on 20th Century Boys, where I said I thought the meeting between Kana and Donkey at the end of the volume felt a little bit off. It was just a character moment between two people who didn't seem to have a strong reason to connect with each other. And that is still true. But it also served to introduce an idea that is going to be kind of important going forward, which is that Donkey chose not to be an astronaut, even though he admired the astronauts who went to the moon. He chose to be a science teacher. He was aiming to become more of a normal, everyday person who did normal, everyday things in the same vein as astronauts and other great scientists. He didn't have great ambitions. He had very meaningful, immediate goals. And there is actually a contrast there between Donkey and our friend. Our friend wants to be the center of attention. Donkey just wanted to be a good man who helped other people find their place in life. That's very admirable, and it's a major idea because all of the heroes of 20th Century Boys are people like Donkey. They're not people like this guy here. And I think drawing that that distinction here in this story, drawing it freshly again, especially now that we have been in the future of 2015 much longer than we were in the era we originally started in, story-wise. The 1997 to year 2000 section was about 3.5 volumes, and now we are on volume 8. So we have been in the present of 2015 much longer than we were in the present of 1997. We need a reminder that our heroes were just regular guys at the beginning of this. They did not set out and train their whole lives to become the wily, tricksy, and somewhat ruthless men they are today. That said, I still think that moment would have been better off shared with Yoshitsune, somebody who already had a strong emotional connection to Donkey, rather than Kana, who doesn't seem to have ever met Donkey in her life. That said, again, this reminder that being an ordinary person and contributing to the immediate society around you is better than the ambition of being a great ruler like our friend is an important one. It's an important distinction and theme that runs through the entire story, to be sure, but in this section, the final act of this in particular. So what happens in this volume? Well, for the first 12 chapters, we are building up to the long-awaited visit of the Pope to Shinjuku Catholic Church and Father Nitani. But we don't actually begin in Japan. We begin in Italy with Father Luciano, another Roman Catholic priest who his mentor, a bishop, Bishop Perrin, has recently died. I believe he was a bishop. I guess, I don't know, they just call him Father, so he was not a full bishop. But he was an important man in the Catholic Church. Not one with an outward-facing position, but one who specialized in determining the authenticity of historical documents. So he was really very much a scholar and not a day-to-day pastor. And as we follow Father Luciano for a couple of chapters, we realize that Father Perrin had stumbled across a piece of the conspiracy. And we begin to realize that when Monchan discovered the new book of prophecy in his younger days, he had, before he died of cancer, of course, and unfortunate run-in with Sadakio, I guess, more specifically. Monchan had actually duplicated the new Book of Prophecy, and he had a forger disguise it as a historical book of prophecy, and he hid it in a number of places around the world. This is an interesting decision on Monchan's part. He was trying to hide away the secrets that he learned in ways that would not be very easy to wipe out, so that if potentially his friends lost track of the new Book of Prophecy, or he never got a copy of it to them, they still might find it somewhere out in the world. And also, he was trying to warn people in the larger world what was to come. Why he chose this particular method to do it is not 100% clear. And of course, at this point in the story, Monchan is dead, so we can't ask him to be sure. This is a weird choice on the character's part that will never be fully explained to us in the audience. And I think this mainly happens to get Father Luciano to Japan. So it is a little bit of a weakness in the story, in my opinion. And I'm not sure it's 100% necessary, as Father Luciano doesn't really bring a whole lot to the table in this act of the story. It is an interesting bit of background and an interesting character story, but I kind of feel like this part of the story is excessive, and it may just have been written as a way to ease us out of the part of the story we were in, where we were traveling into the past to get insight into our original heroes at a moment when they were in their youth, and back into the modern era, which is fine, I guess. But it is 2 whole chapters, which is a lot of page real estate to devote to just this minor side character whose presence is honestly something of a coincidence. That is, I think, a good 40 pages here, just for Father Luciano and his story. Let's see. How many pages exactly? It looks like it is 38 pages, to be exact. Again, that is a lot of real estate. 2 chapters, they don't just whiz by. That said, I think it's okay. Urasawa does excel at this kind of vignette storytelling. It is a well-written story from the character perspective, from the way the characters are developed, and as a technique to build suspense. We are building suspense in a new direction here. We have been foreshadowing, setting up the Pope's visit for quite some time, but not a whole lot of tension has been ratcheted up around that. We've known for a while the new Book of Prophecy says the Pope is going to be assassinated, but now we are beginning to really ratchet that plot thread tight. So when Father Luciano gets to Japan, he is disguised as a civilian. Luciano was not always a good guy. He used to be a gangster, much like Father Natani. And so he gets arrested coming through customs, especially because he doesn't have a passport. There is a great scene where Detective Chuno has to figure out what's going on with Father Luciano. Again, we get some great character work here. There's a language barrier. Chono doesn't speak really a whole lot of Italian. Apparently he took it when he was in college, but he doesn't remember a whole lot. They have to try and figure out what the other is saying. And I do like that the story does not handhold you at this point. There are no subtitles. You just see Father Luciano speaking in Italian, and you see Chono trying to figure out what's going on. Eventually, Chono puts everything together and takes him to Shinjuku Catholic Church, where he can talk to Father Natani. He also calls Kana in, and we wind up pretty much back where we were before we went into the VR game. We are getting ready for something bad to happen when the Pope visits Shinjuku Catholic Church. We are also reminded that several people have they think hallucinated, seeing our friend around in various parts of Tokyo. These people, including Acho and FDP are not given to delusions or visions of the future. So we're pretty sure this is something that happens in the present, but we can't explain it yet. This is another mystery that ratchets up tension around the Pope's visit. Um, we are get a few more scenes reminding us of the preparations our heroes have made to counter the situation. Kana goes and visits the crime bosses, reminds them that they are helping her keep Shinjuku safe. And finally, we come back to the memorials where our friend is lying in state. And we get this interesting scene where a kid climbs up into the coffin where our friend's body is resting, and he goes to pat him on the face, which leads to this moment. Now, this is another moment that I have some issues with for reasons that I don't think Urasawa could have fully anticipated. This story takes place in 2015. And we have this moment, very dramatic moment, where our friend pulls the kid away from himself, and then he's back to just lying in the coffin, and the kid is insisting that the body moved. Nobody saw this, in spite of the huge, huge line of people that we see in the establishing shot right here. And I find that very hard to believe. Furthermore, this story was admittedly written in 2008, 2009, and I don't think Urasawa could have anticipated just how commonplace cell phones would be in 2015, much less the kind of hardware that they would carry. He obviously could not have anticipated how many people would have been recording and taking pictures in a moment like this. Now you can kind of hand wave this by saying, well, maybe the FDP just didn't allow cameras in this part of the memorial. Although I don't know why they wouldn't, because this is a publicity play on their part. But all in all, I find it very hard to believe that no one was at least looking in this direction when this happened and saw this. So this is a moment that does kind of bother me. It's a small thing. It's clearly just done to remind us that there is a guy walking around with a face wrap on, and to get us very worried and ratchet up that tension. It's just a moment that I find kind of unbelievable. I think I would have preferred if the kid said something like the body was warm, but we didn't see him, didn't see this body lying in state actually reach up and grab the kid. That's just how I would have done it. Obviously, I don't have the and writing chops of Naoki Urasawa, so what do I know? But I just think this is not the best decision. As we move forward, we get something that has been hinted at, but that both I and Urasawa do agree on, something we both agree on. We get explained the connection between the Pope and Father Nitani. And this is actually a story that takes place during the plague of 2001. Of course, there was Bloody New Year's Eve when a biological attack was executed by the FDP, blaming Kenji and the Kenji faction, as they put it. And in the wake of that, a lot of people were infected who were not yet immunized against the disease. So they run their vaccine all over the globe. And in a specific part of China, we have a Catholic priest trying to deliver the vaccines. This is the priest that would go on to become the Pope in the present day. And he meets Nitani, who is not yet a priest. He's actually a member of the Yakuza who is on the run from a rival faction. And Nitani needs to escape from a police inquiry. And the Pope, or our priest right now, because he's not the Pope yet, he doesn't know how to drive, which is not that surprising since he is from Italy. Not a lot of Europeans, it turns out, know how to drive. And Nitani does. So he offers to drive the father out there. It's monsoon season. A bridge gets washed out. There's a dramatic moment when they have to work together to get across the bridge. The priest winds up holding the bridge up and stable, holding a support beam so it doesn't get washed away, while Nitani just guns the engine and shoots the truck over the river. The priest gets washed away, but he survives. He winds up downstream, has to walk back where he finds Natani, who is about to open a bottle of wine in memory of his friend. It's a really touching and heartwarming sequence, and it does establish why there is this rapport between Father Natani and Pope. All in all, where I found the Luciano sequence to be a little bit flat and a little bit excessive, honestly, I really like this sequence. I think it would have been stronger if we didn't have a very similar sequence earlier. Now, admittedly, Luciano and Natani do bond over their very similar origins, but I don't know. I think this would have been a case where just having Father Natani's story basically serve in place of Father Luciano's story would have been a more effective way to bring us back to the present moment. And again, I don't see as Luciano really added a whole lot to the story. So it is what it is. The next several chapters show us various things that our heroes are doing to make Shinjuku safer and to search for number 13, the FDP's hired assassin. And admittedly, number 13 is also a true believer in the gospel, according to our friend. So it makes sense that he would be the one to attempt to assassinate the Pope. We see a lot of different things being done. Basically, we have 2.5 whole chapters of ratcheting up the tension in this way. And again, this feels a little excessive. I think, again, the purpose of these chapters is to reintroduce some of these characters. Number 13 in particular, who only shows up every so often anyways, and who is always in some kind of disguise, or comes back after a significant time jump. He does require some reestablishing and a reminder that he's really kind of a creepy guy. He always has been. He's always been introduced in these weird montages where we see him do stuff that should be inoffensive, but still manages to make him look creepy instead. So I do appreciate that part. There's a strong element of character consistency there, the way 13 is introduced, but it does seem a little excessive. Now, maybe this is just me reacting to the suspense Urasawa wants to build. I want to spend all this time building up characters. I want to know what's going to happen, right? But what we do get that's important for the plot unfolding, as opposed to just building tension in characters, is another meeting between the Chief Dream Navigator and Banjome, where they discuss seeing somebody who looks like our friend poking around there. And finally, we get the reveal that after his visit to Shinjuku Catholic Church, the Pope is going to perform a mass over the body of our friend. This is significant because it's a second opportunity for the kind of high-profile pageantry that all of the FDP's prophecy fulfillments have been. This is the kind of thing they do when they fulfill another point of their prophecy. They make sure the whole world is watching. They do it in the most high-profile fashion possible. And as soon as he hears this, Manjome realizes that the important thing is not the visit to Shinjuku Catholic Church. And this is also told to, or at least it leaks out to our heroes, who suddenly have to struggle to reorient their efforts. They have successfully safeguarded the Pope's visit to Shinjuku Catholic Church, but now they have to do it all over again in a location where they have not spent any time setting up their pieces. They don't have allies. They don't have an inn set up. So the next couple of chapters are just this scrambling. The expo is about to open. Our friend is lying in state. And everyone is scrambling to get there before the Pope's ceremony takes place. At the same time, we hear interesting stories about a salesman in a gas mask leaving briefcases in various parts of the countryside. We hear about this because there has been an outbreak of the new Bloody New Year's Eve plague, a new strain of it has broken out across Japan in various places. And we get a shot of Harunamio going around kind of doing a morale building kind of a tour. This is not exactly like the USO because he's not visiting the military, he's visiting a disaster zone effectively. But we hear this story as it's told to Morrow, who is, of course, Harunamio's agent. And again, this is a good character moment combined with a moment that moves the plot forward. Because what we realize and what Morrow realizes immediately is this is the kind of thing that really appeals to the almost childish nature of the FDP and their obsession with these prophecies that were made when our friend was very young. However, there's no easy way for Morrow to warn his allies of this, so we just have to realize that our heroes are pretty much going to be in the dark on this particular point. At this time, we actually come back to the United States, where Karoyan has been driving around in his Soba truck and chasing rumors of the plague, and somebody who has made a cure to the plague. Yes, Karoyan believes he has located Kenji's older sister, Kiriko, and they are trying to find her and the vaccine that she has been making and using to protect people in the U.S. Karoyan also hears these stories about a man in a gas mask, and then he meets up with a motorcycle gang who claim to have been vaccinated by Kiriko. So we have Karoyan on the road trying to track down Kiriko. We have our heroes in Japan trying to safeguard the Pope. And the opening of the expo, everything goes down. This is probably the most important W that the FDP gets. The Kenji and his allies are not able to prevent the assassination of the Pope. Instead, our friend does. As I said, we are about to witness the birth of a god. He rises up out of his grave. Of course, we have known for a while that he was not actually dead, but just faking. The Pope is astonished, and he thinks it's a miracle. And when an attempt is made to assassinate the Pope, our friend is shot instead. And this is pretty much everything he needs to become the hero of the world. Now, the new Book of Prophecy says he will be elected president of the world, but this popularity, this wondrous instance where he seems to come back from the dead, and then the dramatic way after being shot, he walks out into the center of this expo opening, and he does the finger of the FDP sign. All of this is a promise, or it appears to be a promise of his incredible power, his ability to prevent harm, his ability to uphold the good of the world. It is the perfect show necessary for our friend to come to power. And finally, we see the last page in the new Book of Prophecy come to fruition. And that page says, a phone will go ring, 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 and all the preparations will be ready. And there's a phone sitting in the middle of the table. It rings, and our friend answers. Finally, at this moment, all the preparations are complete. We see salesmen in gas masks all over the world, setting down briefcases. They spray aerosol in the air, undoubtedly releasing more of the deadly virus. And the world as we know it ends. This is the end of Act 2 and the beginning of Act 3 of 20th Century Boys. It is a great culmination. It is the ultimate low point in the story. Our friend has achieved an apotheosis that is unbelievable given his origins. I mean, we have seen people in pulp stories reach this level of power, of control, of brainwashing before. But one of the interesting things about this is our friend is really just a normal person. He has a lot of charisma. He has a good understanding of people. He might be able to predict the future to a certain extent, but he's not the only one who can do that. No, our friend has truly done something momentous, and we can see how he did it, and we can kind of understand why people let him get away with it. And this makes him, I think, a really impressive villain in the pantheon of villains. Very few people have been shown to reach this level of raw power through simple cunning and understanding of human nature. And while as I said before, there do seem to be some holes in this rise to power, they're pretty minor ones, and I'm willing to let them slide because the story is quite good. Especially though in this sequence where I think the media kind of reacts in ways that don't seem entirely believable to me. I know that we're trying to say something about our friend's cunning, his foresight, and his personal charisma, but I just don't buy it in its entirety. That's okay. You don't have to be 100% satisfied with every step of a story. And it's not a hugely weak, it's not a huge weakness to have in the chain of events. Yes, a chain is only as strong as its weakest link, but even the weakest link isn't that weak. It's just not as strong as every other link in the chain. So I'll allow it. So now that we are at the ultimate low point, where do we go from here? Well, there's only one way to go, and that's up. But in order to do that, we're going to need everyone we can get. There has been someone pretty important to this story, that hasn't played a hand in quite some time. And now that our friend has reached the pinnacle, well, there's one guy that's best suited to knock him off. Enji's coming back. Talk about that next time. That's all I've got for you today. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. There's a like button and a subscribe button down there. You can use those as you see fit, and I will talk to you later.